Or it can be a figure like Eva Longoria. My time in Mexico City, I spent it walking a lot. And something about the streets of Mexico City invites you to walk. It also destroys your feet. It feels like you go
Well,
from
because of
terrain
the
to yes, yes.
yeah, yeah, it depends on the season too, on the shoes, on getting used to it as well. I mean, but it is true, like yeah, it is true.
I am always someone who wants to like have more walkability, more like more public like transportation also. So like
Yeah,
being there in Mexico City, I got to like really enjoy the
yeah,
public
yeah, that's
transit.
amazing.
And I love that. I want way more similar like rapid bus lanes
Yeah,
here
I
in
mean,
Chicago.
every big city should have one of those. Honestly, I mean, I've lived in three parts of the U.S. By at this point, Chicago at least has the CTA, but it's really not good. Like, I mean, the fact that it's all about going to the loop and like all lines go to the loop and come back and they don't connect with each other is just not functional. Like that. I mean, yeah, the U.S. should invest more in public transit, but they don't. People don't believe in that. I don't know why, but they believe in cars.
They people believe it too much in cars, and you know what?
Yeah.
Here in Dovewhether, good evening. I am your host, AP. People do love cars too much, and because we are a pro pedestrian show, a queer, trans Mexican pro pedestrian show, we always love the foot. In this show, we love the foot and the football that goes along with it. And as we have like stepped into the queer world of sports with Unrivaled, we're gonna step into maybe the heterosexual side of sports. Because today I am sitting with a gentleman. I'm sitting with Dr. Alfonso Fierro, an educator teaching the future minds of Chicago at Northwestern University at the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. He is a researcher and writer. His bag is building size because he talks a lot about architecture. As Alfonso is also writing a manuscript around his dissertation, The Revolutionary Habituations, Modern Mexico, Urban Youth. Alfonso dropped some heat, some knowledge on that eugenicist group known as Los Científicos in it. Please give it a read. It's linked below. He also writes in Substack and contributes to the show Sur Urbano. When he's not teaching, researching, writing, developing exhibits, he is running BU, Biblioteca Urbana, which translates to Library Urbana. Alfonso, boa tarde or buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. How are you?
I am great. I'm ready to talk about a sports league, a sports team that is close to my heart. Football, soccer, as some call it. And today we're going to talk about Toros Neza. What is your history with this Toros Neza?
Well, in fact, I mean, Toros Neza was is kind of like the stuff of like a legend, right? I mean, I remember growing up in the 1990s in Mexico City, and Toros Neza was already very famous. It was already kind of legendary, at least among the kids, because they came out to the field wearing masks or wearing their hair painted in colors, or there was this story that they had fought, like against the Jamaicans in some game that nobody watched because but people knew about the fight, and so it was like this legendary team, and it happened to reach the final against Chivas, which is like one of two Mexico's big teams, right? Chivas and America. And me and my dad, we happen to be Chivas fans. So, and my father had family in Guadalajara, so we were actually in that game, in that final, where Chivas won 6-1 against Toros Neza.
Which
Um,
we are gonna get into.
we,
There's
exactly,
so
exactly,
much that
exactly.
went into that, and
So I mean, this show, I think we're going to talk about that too. Plays a lot with nostalgia for the 1990s,
uh huh.
and it kind of works, Like I mean, in some way, it does make me feel nostalgic about that team, about that show, that spectacle, about that league too, which no longer exists, and we probably going to talk about that too. Um, and yeah, anyways,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're the one that like put me on this Toros Neza documentary. I didn't know anything about this team. You're from the centro of Mexico. I am from the north of Mexico. So you talk about the two big teams, Chivas and Americas. Brother, there's two big teams in Mexico. They're called Los Rayados y Los Tigres. All right.
yeah, they're huge too. They're huge. Nah, I mean, these days they're the best, right? But yeah, in classic history, it was Chivas and America. In modern history, it's definitely Rayados and Tigres for sure.
I mean, true. Like you can hear "Arriba las Chivas" as much as you can hear "Viva Mexico" in Guadalajara. So I'm grateful that you brought this because it kind of like sits in this like gossamer view of Mexico in the '90s, and especially kind of this like good old boy like nature within the episodes. It's only about 5 episodes. It's on the streaming service VIX, and it talks about this legendary run of Toros Neza in the '90s, from the moment that they kind of started bringing in some. Well, they revived the soccer scene in a very specific part of Mexico City, a place called.
Ciudad Nezahualcóyotl. Yes.
And so that, which is like a growth out of La Ciudad de Mexico. Um, Wikipedia describes it as a shanty town. And honestly, the videos of the '90s, it's clearly in the '90s. It seemed very undeveloped, very mismanaged by the larger like federal state in that general area. And even in the last 30 years, the specific region of CDMX went from being these very split municipalities into a larger, more unified space.
Ciudad Neza is an urbanization, a popular uh, urbanization that is located on what used to be the Texcoco Lake, on the dried lake bed of Texcoco, which was emptied for many generations. The lake was emptied, and eventually it was dry land. And so back in the 1940s, Mexico's economy was rapidly growing, or beginning to rapidly grow, and especially located in Mexico City, this growth. And so that attracted many, many migrants from Mexico's rural areas to Mexico City. And so successive waves of migration started to arrive from the country to the city back then. And these people did not have a place to live in general terms. And so that's where Nesa began, right? Because there were land developers who were illegally, informally dividing the old lake bed and selling plots of land to people who were aspiring homeowners, right? That needed a place to live. And these people bought a piece of land and then began to self-build their homes, right? Now the problem is that the government did not provide basic services like drainage, like water, like electricity, but still people, like, build their homes with a lot of knowledge on how to build, how to construct, with a lot of effort, also with very intelligent economic calculations. For example, building a basic place and then adding on that as time passed by, as you were able to save and so forth. And then especially by very important processes of social organization. So neighbors got together to either build those services for themselves, like build drainage for their neighborhood, or to demand Mexico's government to provide those services, right? So the history of NESA is also the history of social organizing. In fact, in the 1970s, there was like a huge strike in NESA. One of the biggest social movements from that decade happened there, and so on. So I think that these two characteristics, the fact that NESA is a migrant town and the fact that NESA has been self-built by the inhabitants themselves, who have put a lot of effort, but also a lot of skill and a lot of organizing capability, really defines what this place is about. Uh, to be honest.
Yeah. And that to me, as Chicago, a son of Chicago, like, it reminds me so much of the history of, well, the south side of Chicago. Chicago had
Exactly.
an immense growth in the Great Migration of the early 20th century. And the south side was a place that was predominantly black. It increased like the economic presence of those black residents there. There was black and tan um, organizations where people of color and different shades can come together in a segregated time in Jim Crow. And even down to like maybe doing some illegal building like that. Both Nessa and the south side of Chicago exist as this place where humanity seems to coalesce and say we deserve more, we deserve greater, and one of those things is leisure, and
Exactly.
one of the and I the this documentary really engages with the history of Nessa as a little bit of a rough and tumble town
Mhm.
with less infrastructure than it should have, and how that like really developed the character of this club that was furious on the field, very physical, very agitating to the other team and to the refs and to each other also. And
Yeah,
how we created this, it almost sprouted this character of the general area of being survivors and fighters.
definitely. I think that I even think that the show could have done more to expand a little bit on the history of Nesa, on its, like, its history of social organization and its transgressive culture, right? Because I do believe that Nesa's migrant identity and its self-built identity as well really explains why this is also a place where many transgressive forms of culture have taken root there, like from, and I'm talking about from having a huge punk movement in the 1980s, spearheaded by Mierdas Punk, but also a very interesting queer culture. For example, I mentioned to you in our conversations this place called the Spartacus, which is, a legendary gay club in Nesa. So I do think that somehow the team connected with with this part of Nesa, with this very transgressive identity and culture, and very like sort of like in your as you were saying, like very in your face, like we deserve better, we want our team, we are going to defend it, and this will be fun, like no matter how long it lasts, we will try, and that is really fantastic.
And almost immediately, like the forces within this general area, like coalesce into making this team happen. One of them being a construction of a football stadium that was in a bad place. It was breaking down. Of course, this is also like um, a famously difficult place to build because of
Exactly.
it's built on top of a lake.
Yeah, in the muddy waters of the lake, so it's very hard to build something like a stadium. But to your point as well, like this is a place where the government has provided very little in terms of leisure, in terms of parks, in terms of green areas, in terms of athletic centers, and so forth.
And some of that like is it's visible here in this documentary as it holds a lot of like historical footage and a lot of historical broadcasts. They just give a glimpse into how this space is. One of them being this maybe transgressive nature of Nessa as a rough and tumbles place can be seen in the stadium and in the historical videos of the stadium. The fans are alive. They are throwing things. Every single field has paper on it, has like strings on it, and there's a cage keeping the football fans out of the field. It looks like a blast. It looks like a very rowdy place. There's no real like exploration of what it was like to be a fan in the negative sense, because so many people there were there to like deal with everything, including the other fans. One of them being this woman who was a child at the time, whose own father was playing on the team, and he was like, "Hey, this is no place for a girl." But even so, she was there. She's part of the neighborhood. She's part of the people there. And even if it looks so rowdy, the people there took care of each other.
Yeah, as far, but it's true. It's true what you're saying. That the show avoids maybe some difficult topics. That revolve around Mexican football. For example, by violence. It's something that is true, and the show does not capture that.
Even though they
Or
mentioned the stadium having its area for the inches, who are the
yeah,
ultras.
yeah, yeah, and just to give another example, like homophobia in Mexican football is pretty well known. I mean, Mexico has been penalized for certain shouts that you hear on the stands, and that is some. Even though the show does make a gesture of trying to interview somebody that works at Spartacus, this famous gay club, it's not really part of the show, and we don't get a sense of how, like people that go to Spartacus, how do they remember Toros Neza? What are their experiences about that? How do they remember the fans, the celebrations? Were they included or not? Did they feel part of it or not? That's like a sort of like a loose end in the show. Um, just to add on top of what you were saying about this girl who is now a woman.
This is a little. The truth is that like Toros Neza sprouted a lot of big talent throughout the La Liga and like the football Premier League in Mexico. Like that, one of those players is being Miguel Herrera, who has the nickname El Piojo, who
Mm.
went on to be a very important manager and coach, up to and including representing Mexico in multiple times in the national stage as their lead coach.
Yeah, in I think it was 2014's World Cup where he was very famous because of how he celebrated the goals, but also because after Mexico was eliminated, he was very violent as well. So it's kind of like we get the backstory of this character because we all saw that, right? But maybe we didn't necessarily remember El Piojo. But now we get the backstory of this character. It turns out that they had always been this way.
And and it's very interesting, right? Like, because like you can't have this guy come in that has this like position in the larger national stage in Mexico and talk about the kind of like bullshit that he got up to. Like he would probably like ignore that request. And the same thing can be said for other like prominent like parts that came out of Toros Neza, one of them being the coach of the 90s, Ojitos Mesa, who kind of created order in this chaos of punks and miscreants to make a team that can take on the most professional team in at the time, Las Chivas. So
True.
even there, like you can't really like bring in this guy and be like, hey, can you tell us how you were like, how all the lurid stories of the time where like, these men were very pumped up into who they became.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
One of those ones is, as long as we're talking about players, like every single player in this documentary has so much personality.
I know it did have character, that team. It will not be criticized for not having character, right?
And it's built in such a way where like you can follow their story. Like I
Yeah.
think about Federico Lusenhoff, who's an Argentinian player, and he comes in, he says, "Yeah, I was a broke kid from Argentina, and then I kind of blew my chance to being a good like Argentinian player, but I got this miraculous call to be part of Toros Neza, and then bam, here I am."
Yeah.
And it's like it follows a structure, and it's true for so many of these guys.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I love the story about Turco Mohamed, who is nowadays also a very successful manager, by the way. But I mean, the one thing that I like about that story, I mean, besides the fact that he was a fantastic player, is that he was like the perfect fit because Turco Mohamed came from a team that is very much kind of like the Toros Neza of Argentina, right? It's called Huracan. And I mean, in Argentina in general, much more than in Mexico, especially in these days, soccer is very much related to urban neighborhoods. So it's very important which team belongs to which neighborhood. That's huge in Argentinian soccer, right? Especially in Buenos Aires, the capital. Huracan, the team from which Turco emerged, is a very old club from like the beginning of the 20th century that is firmly rooted in a place called Parque Patricios, which is also like a very working class, kind of like marginalized neighborhood in Buenos Aires. So I think that Turco was a figure there, and then he came to Toros Neza, and I believe that he probably was the perfect match. Like he knew exactly where he was, what he had to do, the kind of spectacle that people were wanting, and he gave that, and he became a figure there as well. So I love that. I love that character as like as a character in the show.
Yeah, as a figure that like represents these kind of like clashing themes or these collapsing themes onto one person. Yeah, he was already from a very physical club in Argentina and comes here to give his own like shoulder and knee to whoever needs it. And it also gets to the point where he's the superstar. He is
Yep.
the superstar. He has the most goals ever recorded for Toros Neza. He is also the guy that is like, just pass it to this guy. Just pass it to this guy. He'll make this thing happen. He's the Michael Jordan of this
Exactly.
era.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yes, and a popular figure as well, which is something that, I mean, they mentioned this at the end of the show when they say, well, after Mohamed, they brought Bebeto, which was a very famous Brazilian player who was also very good, but he was not a popular figure. It's not just about being good in playing soccer. You need, if you're going to identify with the fans in a place like Nesa, you need more than that. Like, you need to be popular, you need to do things that people will like, and Turco knew how to do that
And
in
he
a
did
way
it
that
well.
many other players did not, and that's kind of fun too.
It does feel like he was the most like media savvy out of all of them, because there's also all these historical footage of him at in talk shows where
Yes.
he's being, yeah, he's being boisterous, but he's also like communicating the reality that he feels, which is, I'm the best one here.
Mhm.
We're also the most prominent team and we're growing. You need to respect us, and I mean that's great. The El Turco, as he went by, right? Like, he's just a fun character to look at. He has
Yes,
some of his outfits in this too are so great.
I know. The 1990s fashion. That's a great topic. I love it. I love it. And yeah, and the thing about the painting the hair, all that stuff, really revolves around that kind of. But yes, he's an amazing, like almost like fictional character, although he's real. Um, but then, yes, as you say, many of them, and many of them keep saying like, well, if it was today, I would never have been able to play professionally, right? It was like this little window where they were able to be themselves and be professional soccer players in a way that maybe today, where like diet is super controlled, discipline is very controlled, everybody wants to be super professional, kind of like that window has closed, right? And but in the 1990s, and I can talk a little bit more about that in terms of the Mexican Football League, there was still a chance for somebody like Lusenhoff, like who got expelled every 2 games, or somebody like Turco who was doing whatever he wanted,
Or
or,
Nettleson,
or
who
Tio
has
Correra with his bad character and his, like sort of like rage moments, which are crazy, but that's the way he is.
these guys were definitely figures of their time in the 90s. Even in the like, this team is very international, right? And they even represent almost like international level narratives, because we're talking about the football league in Mexico, and how like maybe things were a little harder in the 90s. In the United States, it's the same thing. People love to talk about how the 90s basketball, the NBA, is way more physical than it is now, and it therefore way more interesting to look at now. And much as you mentioned, there's this interest in like the honing of the physical specimen through diet and control and sleep and every other trick that they can find for the maximum output. This team was never delivering the maximum output, and even
Only in terms of spectacle. In that they were giving everything.
And I think this guy, that started the revival, a gentleman who I cannot respect because he's a capital owner. This guy that owns Out in Mexico, he talks about it very deliberately. Toros Neza was supposed to be an advertising vehicle for his company, and go ahead.
Yes, I think this is very interesting what you're saying in many ways, because first, this guy, the story that they tell us about him is that he came from below, right? So in a way, he is the representation of the life story of many people in Nesa who were, like hardworking people that became successful, but with a lot of sacrifice and a lot of time, right? Or the aspiration of many people in Nesa, right? Like, I want to one day be successful, so that I can have things that I haven't been able to have. Now, the fact that he came from below, they tell us, really also kind of like define Nesa's spirit, right? Because this is a moment where Mexico's league is living what I call the neoliberalization of Mexican soccer,
Mm.
by which I mean corporations taking over Mexico's teams and the league, or millionaires taking over Mexico's corporations and team. So in a way, this guy is part of that, because as you're saying, he is a millionaire. But on the other hand, he's a millionaire who came from below, and he's not the owner of Cemex, Mexico's largest cement company, which owns Tigres, or FEMSA Coca-Cola, which owns Rayados, or Grupo Modelo, the big brewery who owns Santos Laguna, and so on. That process was already beginning to happen in the 1990s. So he's at very same time part of that, and an exception to that, and that brought a very specific character to Nesa. And this is also true regarding what you were saying about internationalism, because this is the moment where the Mexican soccer league or football league began to become much more import oriented, in the sense that they bring players from Brazil, from Argentina, from Chile, from Colombia to play for the Mexican league instead of export oriented. If you go to Argentina, that is a league that is export oriented. So it's all about creating young talent so that they can sell it abroad and earn money, right? So these are the changes that are happening in Mexican football at that time, and which allowed or prepared the conditions for something like Toros Neza to happen. But it would not happen now. Now that it's only, like huge companies that own most of the teams, somebody like him would probably not have a chance, right?
And it's very visible now because this is happening, as you said, very internationally. It opened up the space for external economic powers to come in for more exploitative extraction. And yeah, these could be major companies, or it can be a figure like Eva Longoria, who has
Right,
been a part investor of Club Necaxa, who is a
right.
big team, an important team.
Yeah, yeah. A team that, like in the classic history of Mexican football, was the team of the electricians union, right? So, that's what I mean, right? Like Cruz Azul is a cooperative, right? Like, and so on. But that began to change a lot, especially in the 1990s. And just to add something on this figure, the owner of Toros Neza, I mean, he made his money from offering cheap, accessible collective credits for cars and for houses. So that to me is very important, because these are the two big necessities of people growing in an urban periphery like Nesa, right? With a lot of underdevelopment. They need a car because there is not good public transportation, and they need a house because that's why they're there. So the fact that these reflect each other, and that he was using the team as advertising, is very important to me in those terms as well. The fact that he was selling cars and houses, right? Or credits for cars and houses.
Which is like very neoliberal. It's very much
Exactly.
the state foregoing development that the populace needs, but propping up, or in some way, either directly or indirectly, a financial institution like Autofin that can give credit to people when needed versus just building the damn house. Build a damn
Exactly.
house, Chicago.
Exactly. Or build public transportation, right? Like, this is what Nesa neighborhoods have been demanding, right? We need the subway to get here. We need better buses. We need ways to connect to the city, because we work in the city, right? We all have to go there every day, 2 hours, 3 hours of commute to work for in the central part of Mexico City, and then come back. So yes, that is very significant. The fact that this owner was selling cars or credit for houses and for cars.
And I think now I like I didn't know this history of Club Necaxa and how they were like they spread it out of the Electric Union, and because that is so indicative of like how things how people usually organize for like social reproduction, which is like when you're doing a thing and the people around you like it, it's good to like feed into it.
Hmm.
People like playing football in Mexico. Of course, they're gonna make teams. Here in the United States, uh, like I think there's this big conversation right now about the Chicago Bears moving out of Chicago.
Right, I saw that. That would be awful.
It would be because the Chicago Bears are the longest running franchise in the NFL that is still in their original city. The There's not a lot of teams in the NFL, but like moving out of Chicago, it's not a it's not gonna break my heart because I'm a Chicagoan and I like the Bears. It's gonna break my heart because a billionaire is looking to use
Yeah,
public funding to make more money.
yeah, yeah, and extort cities to do that. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I lived for many years in Oakland, in the Bay Area,
Hmm.
and every single franchise, Oakland, a very working class neighborhood as well, very black neighborhood, well, city, very black town, very working class town. Every franchise left, left they because they were, like, what they call negotiating conditions with the city to be able to get more money, right? So they all went to Las Vegas or to wherever, and it's very sad because, like, living there, I saw how people were very much very much identified with franchises like the Raiders, like the Athletics, and so on. And it was a big thing, like, it was a big thing for a working class town to have entertainment, to have a sports team that they admire, that they identified with, right? And they brought to these franchises a lot of character as well. And now they play in Las Vegas or wherever, and it's just kind of like, it's like emptying it's like emptying sports from its social connections to me.
It
That's what happens. I mean, and that's what's been happening in Mexican football, and that's one of the reasons why it's boring to me nowadays.
I get that. I get that fully. And look, like we are a socialist podcast. We talk very explicitly about the need to remove the profit incentive in the private sector for the sake of well the community. And like is the Chicago Bears moving out of Chicago is not gonna help anyone. It's not even gonna help Hammond, Indiana, because the public fundings will be thrown at the Bears owners for the development that they want, and
Yeah.
I can't abide by that. And Toro Neza has this exact same problem. A smaller team who gets thrown about in the 90s around the central Mexico area because they don't have the space and they don't have the real backing that's needed to have a prolonged franchise in Mexico.
Yes, and even, like, the fact that it was so fleeting, like
Hmm.
that it was like, I mean, to me, this part of the reason why I or let me put it this way. In many ways, I feel like this story about Toros Neza is attractive, and it's nostalgia driven because it reminds people in Mexico of a moment where things felt like they were accelerating, right?
Mhm.
Like everything was fast paced, and Toros Neza came out of nowhere, had a blast, and then disappeared in a matter of just a few years, right? So in a way, it reflects that. It reflects those social changes in terms of pace of life. But in another way, it's what we're talking about here. Like in a league that is increasingly being absorbed by large corporations or by huge millionaires, how much time does a team like Nesa have? And that's sort of like the story that we saw.
I mean, it's not long. Like these guys, they're punks. Sure, they're these guys who are doing a lot of damage to a brand that wants that level of like push and pull, but it's not
Mm,
marketable to a large organization and one
mhm,
or a large populace. One of the
yeah,
things that can be seen in this documentary is constantly other teams talking bad about Toros Neza, being like, "Hey, oh, I'm not ready. I really don't want to go here because they're gonna punch me. They're gonna kick me. They're playing a game of they're playing a game that involves the feet, and that foot is being
and the
kid.
head.
Yes, the one of the like lines that like the intro always has is the estilo karatec, which comes directly from a Toronesa player jumping and intercepting a ball and hitting the chest and the upper body of another player, which is just unacceptable. And it's also
Right, 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 right.
bad for the brand.
Bad for the brand, except that they provide. I mean, something that the show really, I think, does a good job at showing is how they, above everything else, they provided a true spectacle.
Mm.
Like whatever that meant. If that meant coming out on the field wearing masks, well, that is what it meant. Or wearing hats, that is what it meant. If it meant scoring 5 goals, that's what it meant. If it meant losing 5-0, that's what it meant. If it meant having two players get a red card because they were doing this stuff that you're talking about, well, that's what it meant. Like beginning a brawl, starting a brawl in the middle of a soccer game. That's what it meant, like
Not even the middle of it. Like 15 minutes into playing a friendly game with Jamaica, a
it makes no
brawl
sense. That
starts.
story makes no sense. I have no idea how that even was possible, but they did it, like so yes, I feel like that is one of the things that really began catching the attention of the media back then, and especially the attention of people in NESA, right? Who began accepting this team with its talent and its faults, with its good days and bad days. They began to identify with this team spirit in a way, like it in a way that it would be hard to see. I insist, this would be hard to see now. Like I remember when they took the team Atlante, which is also
Mhm.
like a very popular Mexico City team. They took it to Cancun at some point, and they just didn't connect. It just nothing happened. There, like it just not that easy. But in the case of Nesa, something did connect, and that is kind of like what is fun about it.
It's trying to force like magic to happen. You know, this is all happening in Mexico, Mexico. So like we know that like there is this willingness to like sprout out of like the wants and needs of the people around them. One of the things that I notice here, and one of the things that why it could never really happen again, is that so much of this team is player led. there isn't these like overarching structures within the team that says you have to look like this, you have to wear these cleats this day, you have to wear this haircut this day, you have to be you have to be at the press conference after the game for this amount of time or you'll get fined. It was so player led and player
Yes.
focused, and that's we just don't live in that world anymore.
No, it's true. It's true. It's true. In a way, it reminds me of the famous Corinthians democracy. This is a moment in Brazilian soccer where Socrates, who was a huge player, and other players from that team decided that it was the team itself. I mean, including the players, the owners, the manager, but also the like the water boy, whoever. They all needed to make decisions about the team in assembly, right? And sort of like that was a much more politically driven attempt at what you're saying, which is, like it seemed like inside the club things were negotiable, right? Like it was, the players were able to have some autonomy on their decisions on how they wanted to play and so on. And then the manager had some authority, but it was always negotiated with the players and the owner too, like it seems like they were always having conversations like, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep this player or is he not going to be part of the team? This is something that was discussed as a team, which is such an interesting way to manage. And as you're saying, something that I'm sure does not happen today, as far as I know.
The only real place that I can think of is like Messi over there in
Exactly.
Miami, but it's not because Messi is like interested in the player's behavior. He owns the club. He is an owner player,
Yeah,
which is a completely different thing that's
it's
happening
different.
in Nessa.
Yeah, it's different for sure. Yeah.
This is actually where like the my I've grown a bigger interest in sports over the last year and a half. And one of those is just the labor implications of what it means to be a player and what it means to like organize around very visible and skillful labor. Like
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful for players. I mean, in general, they get sold. They tell them, oh, now need to go live there. I mean, unless you're a star, the pay is difficult.
even
And
though that
just like the level of control they have over players, it's something that is noticeable. Mexico, in particular, has been many people in Mexico, ex former players in Mexico, all nowadays they're veterans, have tried to organize something like a union of players or an association of players, and just the owners do not allow for that to happen really, or for them to have any real say on the rules of engagement, right? Like the labor conditions we would call.
yeah, which is a damn shame, especially because truly, both Toros Neza and the Chicago Bulls could not exist without the actual players in their labor. Like literally, it could not happen, and it's a damn shame. I hate
Yeah.
it. But what I do love is just this story. This story is very interesting to me, and how like it distills this both like internal desire to represent a space, your town, your hood, and also how it like that comes ahead into the larger municipalities and their bigger economic forces. I really like it, and I really like this documentary. How even though it's not engaging with these things directly, it's so visible, and as
Yes.
long as you have the mindset to look into that, you can
Yes.
see its markers.
No, totally. I agree with that. I think that the show tries to, at some points, the show tries to present Toros Neza as a team that represents let's say the Mexico in the 1990s overall, right? Like the what we would call the transition to democracy. That's how it's officially called, but it's basically the moment where the PRI, who had governed Mexico for most of the for a good chunk of the 20th century, was losing hegemony, and so many things were happening back then. You know, like there was a transgressive rock culture, for example, Café Tacuba, Molotov, etc. Even in the mainstream, right? I'm talking about mainstream stuff, or in film, La Ley de Herodes, or even things that were socially happening, like the SZLN, the Zapatista people fighting for self government in the southern part of Mexico, successfully, by the way. Um, so the show tries to present Nessa as part of that moment, like, but I mean, it's fine. It's okay to make that connection. I think because these were times where people felt like something was changing. That is very much true. But again, I would go back to the local aspect, which I
Mhm.
think is more interesting, right? Nessa's transgressiveness as a way in which the team understood and connected with the place where it was rooted, which is Ciudad Nezahualcóyotl, with its legendary transgressive culture, with its working class spirit, with its self-built character. All of those elements really come up in this team and in the show. So I'm more inclined to see it that way.
And it there's absolutely it's very textual as well. There's even a shout out of a taqueria. I think it's Tio Juan's or something like that. That like all the team would go eat at afterwards, and it's hyper local to that. There's even footage of like graffiti around the time where Rod Stewart came into the city for the World Cup, and I love that. I love that, and yeah, there is this desire for a larger context within this show, but it is those like moments, those deep internal moments where really it hooks you, and that's honestly why I'm a little sad that they didn't get into like more precise things about the difficulties within the team and like with each player. But that's all right. All right, like Vix, if you are interested in notes, I have a fee. Feel free to call me up.
What did you think about the show being 5 episodes? Do you think it needed more, or were you fine with these, like sort of like mini series, right? Because on the one hand, I think that there were things that were left aside, of course, right? As you were saying. On the other hand, I think that the mini series format kind of reflects what I was saying before, right? Like Nesa's very fleeting emergence into Mexican football. Like it came out of nowhere. They had a blast. They changed everything, and then they disappeared. And all in just a few years. So I think that the miniseries kind of like reflects that. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that. If it needed more episodes, maybe an 8 episode series. I don't know.
If there were more episodes, it would probably help create a larger narrative around Toros Neza, and also the city and also the time in Mexico in the 90s. They might even be able to talk about why the teams actually moved, like financially, the reasons why they moved. The 90s were a difficult time for Mexico. Yeah, there was the peso crisis,
Yes.
and NATO as well coming in to disrupt the labor practices in Mexico, and there was a lot happening. And I think a longer series could delve into that and make a larger connection of like the moment of the 90s and Toronesa. I think when it's five though, when it, five 30-minute episodes, like it becomes a hagiography. It becomes a,
Mm.
a point of propaganda for this team and for
Yes.
the people that came out of it, so they can be seen as greater, as destined to be where they are. Miguel Herrera became who he was because of Toros Neza, and that's why you have to buy the jersey now, and so on. And I like every sports player wants to be the legend, and I think the 5 episode format helps create that legend. But to me, I am a bit of a freak. I love history. Tell me more about what was happening. Um,
I agree. I agree with you. Definitely. Definitely.
so I want to know a little bit about what's happening with you. You were at the final with Chivas and Toros Neza. You were a kid. What was
I
happening?
was. I was. Yes, I was. I mean, the thing is, my dad had family in Guadalajara, and and we were Chivas fans, right? My dad is a Chivas fan. My grandfather was a Chivas fan, and I was a Chivas fan back then. And so he was like, "Well, let's go visit the family, and maybe we can get tickets to go to the stadium." And in the end, we did manage to get tickets. So I was in that final, in in the final where Chivas won 6-1 and became champions, right? So that was definitely. I mean, I remember it vividly. It was very fun. Also, the team that I was rooting for won. But what I remember even more vividly is how people at school, kids at school, would continue to talk about Nesa and Nesa, Toros Nesa. It was always about that. Like it's like as they were saying in the show, Chivas won, but Chivas was like a kind of like a boring team, right? They were
Yeah.
well behaved. It was expected that they could win. They so it was not really a story. Whereas just the fact that Nesa got to the final, they played that final, and they coronated the legend of Nesa with reaching a final and not being able to win. I think that is important as well in the narrative. Um,
Which is also
they,
very
they just made it a
Mexican.
legend. You know, people kept talking about Mohamed and Pony Ruiz and Piojo Herrera and all these guys. They talked about the hair and the mask, and so they be, they surpassed. And nobody remembers who the players in Chivas were really, right? Just the best ones, just the ones that went to play for Mexico as well. But in the case of Tornesa, we all remember who they were.
Yeah, it's very, I being coordinated with a loss is honestly, to me, it feels very Mexican. It feels very kind of like, oh, we did all the hard work. We look
Exactly.
better than you. We were even more, we were more charismatic than you also, and we put on a show. And even in loss, you can't take that shit from any of us.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. They won by losing.
Hmm.
And that is amazing. That's it's just amazing. I mean, what would have happened if they won? I mean, they would still be legendary, maybe, but not so much. Not so much. Really, the fact that they reached the final and lost in that way too. You know, like just by completely collapsing at some point. That is just amazing. Like it's so deserving of telling that story. You know, like this is part of now. It's part of Mexico City's oral tradition. Let's say, right? Like I'm a student and a professor of literature. I respect those stories that get passed on from generation to generation orally, and Toros Neza is one of those for sure.
And now you have blessed this podcast with that exact same spirit of literature. Like you being there, like I've never been in like an important like football or like sports event. Like even when like the Chicago Cubs won the World Series, I wasn't even in Chicago, which is like it's a little bit of a shame, but knowing that you have brought this history that is that has an attraction to it, and it has this larger narratives to it. You've brought it here. I've really enjoyed getting to know these guys, this Toros Neza club as well, and for you to like bring in this time where, yeah, okay, you were rooting for the Chivas, but now we are now in the history of that. So thank you. So now we are going to talk about a little bit of a special segment where we talk about hope or the things that are bringing us good vibes these days. The really like in addition to our spirit. So we're gonna enter into Hopecast. Dr. Fierro, Alfonso, what what's bringing you hope these days? What's bringing you some good energy?
That's a good question. That is a very good question. I would say that I've gotten to know places recently in Mexico where part of sort of like what we were talking about today is going on, like people coming together, working together to improve their lives with whatever resources they have at hand, but with a lot of energy, with a lot of organizing capability, with a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and just by being open to sharing, to building things with each other, learning with each other, and that really gives me hope for sure.
I'm with you on that. You know, I am in Chicago 24/7 now, but my time in Mexico, I've really remember with great love and admiration. I think about my time in CDMX as well, where when I was there last year in 2025, I wanted to find an anti-gentrification protest or like a gathering of real like housing justice folks, and I wasn't able to, which is okay. You know, I was a tourist after all. But what I do know is that people are still organizing. People are really moving forward with what they do have for the sake of having more.
Yes, exactly. And now there are anti gentrification protests. And by the way, the World Cup is coming soon to Mexico City, and tensions are beginning to emerge or to rise regarding gentrification, regarding the touristification of the city for the sake of the World Cup and more generally. So yeah, so nowadays there's a lot about that, and there will be more in the next few months.
Yeah, up to and including the larger like piece of how like the Stadium Azteca has been built and how it's affecting the general area. The
Exactly,
these
exactly,
large
precisely.
these large organizations like the Olympics or FIFA or newer sprouting ones, whatever Saudi Arabia is buying right now, I guess, like will always have these effects. So I'm with you on that. As for me, what's bringing me hope? Like I have been struggling with hope a little bit, but what I do know is that one thing that's bringing me hope is like just the writings of James Baldwin. I
Nice.
read The Fire Next Time just recently, and in it, like James Baldwin is writing to his nephew. You know, it's an essay, right? And in it, he talks. It once again feels like he's talking directly to me, like or I think a lot of people might have had this experience, and James Baldwin just fits as this character, this image in my mind that of someone whose in intellectual prowess and queerness was always derived from a sense of seeking liberation for all, and it's just
Hmm.
been feeding me a lot.
Yes, an amazing writer, for sure.
Well, Dr. Fierro, thank you for being on the show. Where
No
can the good
problem. This was fun. This was very fun.
Thank you so much. Where can the good people of Podcastville find you?
I would like to promote the sort of like the Instagram and TikTok account that I have going, which is Bu, which, as you're saying, it's an urban public digital library, right? So I just share recommendations on books that relate to urban spaces in Latin America or Latinx spaces here in the US.
Right on. You can see those links in the description. Please give it a follow. The work that you're doing over there is very interesting. It's also just like it's just so well written. Also, like I really have enjoyed your writing so far. I hope to see more things on your Substack, which will also be linked below.
Thank you.
As for us, you can always find us in the same old places: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Upscroll, at Dovewhether. Links below. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.